Hi, this podcast like episode or video is going to be about talking and listening and my problems with today's society, people, online and offline. So let's get into it. I was having a conversation with my online friend, if I could even call him that. Well, I can say that I felt like he wasn't actually listening, but rather just wanting to jump in and make assumptions. He was making assumptions and just basically processing what I was saying as whatever he wanted me to be saying. And that's where the talking and listening part comes in. Someone can talk and someone can hear, but that's not actually listening. He was basically hearing me, but not actually listening. And that's a gripe I have with groups on Facebook and on other platforms as well, is that there's no real listening happening. Just an echo chamber of one's own thoughts and beliefs. And sometimes there's there's a contradictory opinion, but there really wouldn't be one if someone was actually sitting down and actually listening to what the other person had to say instead of regurgitating whatever they were formulating in their own mind. What happens is people just regurgitate whatever they're thinking as if that's what you're actually saying. And that's not really listening. That's hearing and talking. That's not really deep listening. For deep listening to happen, someone has to sit back and truly listen and truly process what the other person is saying and not be making assumptions, like real assumptions in their own head about what the person is actually saying. And it's something that I can say I hate more than anything. And it's what leads to echo chambers and closed mindedness, because people aren't really listening, they're hearing. And that's a problem, because to actually listen, one needs to not make assumptions about what the other person is saying. One needs to actually want to hear what the other person is saying and to be curious and to ask questions and not just sit back passively as if the person is saying everything you want them to say, because you're likely to interpret everything that they are saying as if they are saying what you want them to be saying. And that creates a straw man, because you're not actually fighting against their actual argument. You are fighting against the argument that you are countering in your own mind. And that's problematic when we're actually trying to have a dialogue with people, because there's no back and forth. It's completely one-sided. And it's something I am sick of in, like I said, Facebook groups and in online and in real person and face-to-face conversations, because it destroys the flow of actual conversation, because the conversation stops dead in its tracks, because there is no real listening happening. And as I said, I felt like that way. I felt that way with my online friend. He wasn't really listening to me, in my opinion, because he was just hearing what I was saying and not really processing it. And I've been guilty of this in the past, but I'm trying really hard not to. But when people do it over and over and over again, I get so frustrated, because it's something I fight so hard to stop. But you can't really do that if the other person isn't working on it with you, because for a conversation to actually be a conversation, it has to be back and forth. It has to be questions and answers. And if it's not that, then it's completely one-sided and it is no longer a dialogue. It is a monologue, essentially. It is regurgitating one's own thoughts and opinions into an echo chamber, into a void. Because you're not really learning anything new and the other person isn't really being taught anything. And learning and teaching don't necessarily happen at the same time. That's another part of it as well, because it is something that people lack the ability to do, to actually listen, to want to listen, to have that curiosity. And it's so frustrating when you're trying to actually have a back and forth dialogue and the other person is not actually asking questions. They're not asking questions, they're just making assumptions. And when you try to correct them because they never asked you questions, you don't even know where to start. And that is so frustrating. It is so frustrating when the other person isn't really engaged and you can tell, and you don't even know where to start with correcting them, because you're likely to know that they're making mistakes in their own head about what you're actually saying. And so they create a straw man. And when you're trying to say, well, that's not what I actually meant, they can't hear you. They're only hearing whatever they want to hear. They are shut off in their head. Their prefrontal lobe is just gone. It's gone. It's not there. And that's just the end of a conversation. And that's how I feel when I'm in paganism groups, really, because people only want to hear their own thoughts repeated back to them. That's all they want. They want to hear their own voice, essentially. They want to hear their own thoughts and opinions replayed on a loop. That's not how the real world works. That's not how people work. I'm fine with having people have different opinions, but it needs to come with respect. It needs to come with open curiosity and open dialogue, which cannot happen if one person is talking and the other person is not listening. Because if the other person is only hearing but not truly listening, then no real conversation, no real dialogue can happen. And yes, I'm tired of experiencing that, because it leads to any opinion that does not fall in line with someone's ideas is considered controversial. Like, I'm considered to have controversial opinions in paganism for just pointing out that people are going to go to jail for doxing the KKK, because that's a crime. And so having differing opinions makes you bad and criminal. And as much as I believe there's multiple, right? As much as I believe that there's multiple options to something, doesn't mean I don't believe there isn't a wrong one. And some people will never change. Like, they'll never change. And we have no real dialogue, no real conversation. We don't know who we should trust and who we shouldn't trust. And that's just how frustrated I feel, because I don't feel like I'm actually being listened to a lot of the time when talking to him. I do feel that way, feel actually listened to when I'm talking to certain other people, but definitely not my friend, if I can even call him that. And I feel like real listening without assumptions needs to be had. We need to actually start asking questions about what the other person believes and thinks, and stop making assumptions. I will say part of this podcast episode is just for me to say, because I know he's going to listen to this, start asking questions and stop making assumptions. Yes, I am a pagan. Don't make assumptions about what that actually means. Ask questions. Stop talking, start asking. Start listening. Stop regurgitating whatever the heck you have in your own mind as if it's what the other person thinks and believes. And that's just something that is driving me crazy in the pagan community, because it's an echo chamber. And if you have any sort of opinion that goes out of line, you are suddenly controversial and bad and evil. You can't exist, because if you express any sort of opinion or challenge it and you want questions to be answered, and you ask questions, you're suddenly the enemy. Asking questions is the new sin of our time. It is the greatest sin. Asking questions, criticizing things is like considered ultra bad. And that is just so sad. But that's just where I'm going to end it here. Remember, think for yourself. Don't let the media think for you. Have a nice day. I'm out.